When Madeleine Albright was named Secretary of State in 1997, she became the highest-ranking woman in the history of the United States. And with that came an unlikely legacy. The pins she wore throughout her diplomatic career became a tool for diplomacy. Now an exhibition of her distinct collection is on view at the Davis Museum at her alma mater, Wellesley College. And that's where WGBH News arts editor Jerry Bowen recently spoke with her and checked out the pins at the same time, right?
I did, yeah. The pins story is fascinating because here you have this woman who becomes Secretary of State, and as she told me, she was warned by a fellow Georgetown professor right before she became UN ambassador and later Secretary of State. You've got to do something with your clothing. Of course, you have to wear suits, and so just to distinguish herself, she began wearing pins, and that became a tool for diplomacy because she began wearing pins that suggested how her talks were going. And when I was out there recently, I spoke with her, and she talked about the one pin, her serpent pin, which got everything started, and it was at a time when she had to enforce sanctions against Saddam Hussein.
I had to keep repeating all the terrible things that Saddam Hussein had done. And I said terrible things about him, which he deserved. He'd invaded another country. So ultimately, there was a poem that appeared in the papers in Baghdad comparing me to many things, but among them an unparalleled serpent. And I happened to have a snake pin, so I wore it whenever we were talking about Iraq.
I like that.
And so from then on, there really became a conversation. People started paying attention, and the press would ask, fellow diplomats in the Corps would ask, what do your pins suggest? And she would say, well, read my pins, playing off of George Bush's taxes. Here you see a pin that she wore when she was meeting dear leader Kim Jong-il. Everybody in North Korea has to wear a pin, so she wore a giant American flag. She wore a bee, a stinging bee, when meeting Yasser Arafat, because of course that sent an absolute signal at the talk. She thought she was greeting at the Middle East at the time. And there, her see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil monkeys when she was meeting with Vladimir Putin.
Wow.
And she had described, she said this was one of the faux pas in her career actually, when she told Putin that she thought his policies were evil, and she was reprimanded to some degree by then President Bill Clinton. She said that was the one time she thought she had gone too far. But she really selected, as she said, I selected flowers and butterflies and balloons for the good days and bugs for the bad days. And it's an interesting point of fact. I enjoy telling this. There's a picture of her and Kim Jong-il in the exhibition, and she says, if you look, we're the same height. I'm wearing heels, and so is he at the time. So she's really got great stories behind all of these pins that you see with text at the Davis Museum.
How many of them does she have, or did she?
Well, in this collection, there are over 200 pieces, and they're all fully displayed, a lot telling stories, a lot with the pictures. And they've been traveling the country since she left, her positions, and so they really tell her story. But it's something that she also told me that she had a lot of difficulty with because she was very self-conscious. I mean, here she is, the first female Secretary of State, and there was a lot of concentration on her clothing, and it's something that she had to grapple with.
People don't understand how much of diplomacy is really personal, and it's kind of an opening in some ways, and in some ways it's a closing if you have some message that you're delivering.
Yeah, so she was able to use it, and because she talks to me about, and she's written, you've interviewed her before, she writes about how difficult diplomacy is, especially when you're in a different country and you don't know what the turnout is going to be. It's very difficult to sit across from a leader, so in some ways it was a groundbreaker too, or an icebreaker I should say, and even to the extent at which she said that Vladimir Putin would often make a point of seeing which pin she was wearing and meeting with him to know what level of tension there was going to be.
Yeah, it's funny because brooches, another word for them, have never really caught on. They've never really been in style. So the fact that people didn't sort of pick up on that, they didn't copy her, let's put it that way. But did she buy them? Did people give them to her? How did she even come by them?
Well, it's funny. She says now, because her pins are traveling, people are giving them to her all the time, and she calls them her pity pins until she gets her others back. And I wonder if she ever will, because at this point they are such a part of history, and they've been put into that context. But no, this is something I think that she did just like antiquing. She would survey stores and buy a lot of them. A lot of them are costume jewelry, she says, and she also looked for some antique pins. There was an antique eagle that she wore when she was sworn in as Secretary of State, and it's one of the really valuable ones that she has.
I'm really curious how she kept them at home. how she stored them, how she, did you?
She told it. She kept the, those shoe bags that people put over their doors. Yeah. That's what she keeps them all in, and she color coded them at one point, and that's basically how she kept them.
One per bag?
No. I think they're clumped together.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's that would have been tough. All right, Jared Bowen, that was great. Thanks so much.